This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Have you been thinking about therapy? Have you been trying to get in to see a therapist? Have you found that a lot of therapists that you've been recommended to have either closed books or they've got a really long waiting list? Sometimes months. If you're lucky, it's a couple of weeks. Now, what if there was an alternative that gave you quicker access and at your convenience? So when starting to think about looking for a therapist, try BetterHelp. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient and flexible to your schedule needs. So just fill out the brief questionnaire and get matched with a registered therapist. You can also switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So get moving with therapy and visit BetterHelp. BetterHelp.com/Gunter today will give you 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gunter, GUNTER.
Listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and today I want to continue talking about some of the issues that have arisen from intimate partner violence, but I want to broaden the topic out a bit. And so where I'm going to take this is into the whole idea of misogyny in schools. One of the events in Australia that's happened recently is that at a distinguished private school, a group of boys were basically, they had gotten into their heads to put together a rating system for girls in very misogynistic terms. I won't go into the details because fundamentally I don't particularly want anybody who's listening to this who may be persuaded to use the same ideas to pick up with it and run with it. Hopefully no one's in the audience that's going to do that, but you never know. So why am I raising that? Well, because the idea of how men and boys relate to women isn't simply confined to violence, physical violence, and to killing. It's a broader issue. And as I've said, what we're talking about is the idea of misogyny, right? Which is patriarchal behavior gone bad. And unfortunately, misogyny is sort of built in to the whole patriarchal ideology. Now, I want to raise this case because the outcome here was that the boys involved were expelled from the school. Now, when I first heard that, my first reaction was, I can understand why the school's done that. But my second reaction to it was, that's a shame. In my view, the school actually has missed a very important opportunity to establish this as an educational experience, but not just for the boys. My view is that this is about the whole school community, that this is about a school being a place of attachment. I've spoken about schools fundamentally being attachment hubs where children go from their family to the school to be further socialised, and that happens through establishing solid, healthy attachments between each other, between students and teachers, and then ultimately to the broader community. So the question that I'm raising here is expulsion really the best possible way that we can deal with misogynistic boys? Or should we really be really focusing on education? And taking it one step further, what about the role of restorative justice? And again, an addition to this is that this isn't just about the boys. It's also about how can we support and empower the girls who are affected by the boys' behaviour. Do we treat them as poor little victims? Or do we teach them to get up and stand up for themselves? Reminds me sort of the Bob Marley song. So let's look at this whole idea of understanding misogyny in schools. Essentially, it pops up in schools in lots and lots of different ways. Derogatory comments, sexist jokes, unequal treatment. And don't get me wrong, this doesn't just happen in private boys' schools. It happens across the board, private and public schools, and it happens between, co-ed educational institutions and so on. And so let me make this a little bit more succinct. So what's a common scenario? There's a group of boys making inappropriate comments about female students, especially their appearance. So what's the problem with that? Well, if you got to ask that question, we need to start at the beginning. But let me take it from here. The problem is fundamentally that the boys are being disrespectful. Even if it wasn't about the girl's appearance, any form of disrespectful, derogatory comment about who they are and what they're about is inappropriate. It fundamentally disrupts the educational environment, but also deeply affects the self-esteem and mental health of these young women. So I'm going to set this up a little bit about, let me make a case. So let's start off, let's make a case for expulsion. Now, given the fact that you already know my prejudice, let me just run through this from my own point of view. So expulsion frequently in schools, especially in private schools, is considered for severe cases. Essentially, the idea is that it removes the immediate threat and underscores the unacceptability of the misogynistic behaviour. But while this addresses safety, it doesn't guarantee a change in attitude or behaviour outside of the school environment. So we're basically simply shifting the problem outside our walls. So let me make the case then for education. In an educational process, one of the things I am looking to do is to bring the boys into an environment where they're held accountable for their behaviour. All right. And a really good way of doing that is through the approach of restorative justice. So it deals with misconduct and conflict with an emphasis on repairing harm and restoring relationships, rather than simply punishing the perpetrator or perpetrators. And this system is grounded in principles of empathy, reconciliation, and mutual understanding, which is the very thing we're trying to get to happen between boys and girls, men and women. So the restorative justice process seeks to bring together the victim, the offender, and the community to collectively address what happened and the aftermath of an offence, and to forge a path forward that helps all the parties heal. So, what are the key elements in restorative justice? Well, firstly, it's about acknowledging the harm. The perpetrator has to acknowledge that they have caused harm to both the victim but also to their community. It's a critical step in fostering accountability. It also requires an inclusive dialogue. It's a facilitated discussion that involves not only the victim and the perpetrator, but also other community members, including peers, teachers, and parents or guardians. Now, this dialogue aims to let the victim express their feelings and the impact that the event had on them. And so that the perpetrator gets to understand the consequences of their actions. The next step is that it's looking to repair the harm. Together, all parties develop an agreed plan to make amends. Now, this is particularly on the onus of the boys. This may include apologies, community service, and or other actions that demonstrate repentance and help repair the emotional and physical damage caused. The final step is reintegration. This process fundamentally seeks to reintegrate the offenders back into the community and the school environment in a positive way. But they need to show responsibility, remorse, and the willingness to take the step forward to make amends. It is much better than simply ostracizing them and having them be stigmatized. Now, one of the important elements in this that I think is, incredibly fundamental is involving the boys' parents, especially fathers. And they should be part of the restorative justice process. So, involving the parents, and particularly the dads of boys who exhibit misogynistic behaviour, can be fundamentally instrumental in the process. Fathers play a crucial role in modelling behaviour and setting expectations for their sons. And therefore, their involvement pulls this thing together. Especially if, as a dad, I express my disapproval of their behaviour, of misogyny. So, what are the benefits then for the dad? Well, they learn to role model, right, appropriate behaviours. They show a process of accountability and taking responsibility. They can demonstrate how to show respect and empathy. And thus their sons will learn alternative ways of expressing their masculinity that doesn't involve demeaning others. It also means that the whole process is going to be reinforced at home. When parents are involved, the lessons learned through the restorative justice sessions can be introduced and reinforced at home. Fathers can continue the conversation, ensuring that their sons understand the seriousness of their actions and the importance of respecting others. The other issue is that having the dads involved really supports change, and it's at a grassroots level. Because one of the things that we need to do is help men to be able to call other men on their bad behaviour. And finally, one of the things that's really crucially important is that the dads and their sons become emotionally engaged. So dads participating in these discussions break down stereotypes about emotional expression in men, fostering healthier emotional communication, not just between fathers and sons, but fathers and others. So what about the girls in all of this? Okay, so One of the things that I didn't like about what happened at this particular school and in articles that have been written about it is that there was the persistent emphasis on the girls being victims. And I think that is a pretty difficult label to accept. We need to bring up girls to build up resilience. It's really part of the process to show girls that they don't need to put up with bad behavior. And when they individually or collectively stand up to boys who are misogynistic, then they will feel a lot more empowered. And the negative emotional injury is significantly reduced. Comments around some of these articles were, oh, well, I wouldn't like my daughter to be sitting through a class with the perpetrator sitting next to her. Well, there's another way of looking at that. If she can sit in the classroom with a perpetrator and hold her own, be resilient in that relationship and not accept any bad behavior and have the support from the rest of the class, I think that's an important experience rather than feeling a sense of shame about what the boys said. Right? They have a sense of pride in who they are. All right. So this can be done formally through, teaching girls about their rights and their self-worth. We can do it through assertiveness training and conflict resolution skills. But I think a large part of this comes from the sense of power a girl draws from within. The Vikings talked about shield maidens, that is, women who fought as warriors. I'm always a bit cautious about suggesting that we should bring up boys in the warrior model, but I don't have any hesitation of bringing up girls in that context because they need it. And I speak as the father of a daughter as well as of a son. So I have been able to educate both my kids in what it means to be appropriate in their relationships with each other, what's acceptable from others and what isn't, and how to voice it and what to do about it. And in that community sense, rather than the victim feeling on the outer, the victim is brought in and actually no longer is the victim, but rather is one of many. And we don't necessarily always need to go straight to counselling or peer support groups, but there are some times where that might need to be necessary. So I thought I'd talk about this. So my prejudice is education rather than expulsion. We need to talk about bringing, boys into a place where they're, made responsible, held accountable, and make amends to the people that they, harm. And the people that have been harmed need to stand up and go, I'm not wearing what you're doing. That is on you. So there are times when expulsion may be necessary. I accept that. But I think before we get to that point, we need to explore the educational and restorative approaches and put them together with empowerment and resilience building for those who have been the target. So here's some actionable takeaways that I want you to think about. So each and every one of you should reflect on how you can help foster an environment that not only addresses misogynistic behaviour, but also supports and empowers all the students to thrive. And the emphasis is on all. So, can you advocate, for example, for resilience building programs in your community schools? Can you, look at introducing processes of restorative justice in your community schools? I think that these things should be simply part of the educational community, the attachment village of what we call a school. And on that note, let me finish off. Let me thank you for joining me again on Inspired Change with Gunter. I really want to urge you to use these insights to make a positive impact, not only within our family, but within our educational system. So, till next time, stay inspired and inspire others. This is me signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda at noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at noirtainment.com.